Hello, this is Dr. Lee Hildebrand. I'm Director of Lakeshore Psychology Services in Mequon, Wisconsin. I also am a life and executive coach and work with people all over the country, as well as provide consultation and speaking. Today on my YouTube channel, I want to address a topic that's really brought about a lot of concerns in our culture. It relates to an article that I collaborated on in December of 2021 through the Milwaukee Lifestyle magazine with author Lori Aiken, entitled Logging Off. And in this article, Lori and myself she interviewed me and we discussed a lot of some of the consequences that are happening with both the combination of the intense amount of screen time that people and teens specifically are spending on their screens, as well as the influence of social media. So related to that today, and I've also done talks on this, I want to focus on how screen time is eroding teen confidence. Now, when we look at teenagers, as they're engaging on social media, they are developing and forming their own self-concept, and they are seeing in their peers on social media their avatar life, if you will, their imaginary life, their best pictures. The pictures are edited in the best situations. I've seen people, literally teenagers, spending in certain locations 30 minutes creating the perfect Instagram picture, right? So there's a lot of effort that goes into this at times for people in regard to that. So you have a teenager that is trying to develop their self-concept, and in their real life, they're experiencing a whole host of different feelings and experiences, including depression at times, insecurities about how they look or how they're doing things, or various aspects of who they are, and they're comparing it to this idealized avatar, sort of published presence of their friends in social media, and it can be very distressing for them. Now, another aspect of teenagers that exacerbates the situation is that a proven aspect of being a teenager is there's a concept called the imaginary audience. And what this involves is, as the teenager is going about their lives, they unintentionally have a sense of this imaginary audience that is evaluating what they're doing, how do they look, are they cool, like how they're doing in terms of coming along at this stage of life. And part of that is they just don't know, right? They haven't been adults, they haven't had a lot of years of experience, so there's this aspect that happens in their brains. Now, some of you might remember that aren't teenagers now, may recall that. I certainly remember that aspect of teenageness. So this really plays a part in terms of this avatar life that they're seeing. And really what happens is the social media becomes the imaginary audience. And the imaginary audience looks perfect, glowed up, a lot of changes and filters put on the pictures. Looks like the person's always happy. They only show pictures when they're hanging out with the most fun friends in the coolest situations. And naturally, human nature is there starts to become a comparison point. And this is very difficult for teenage self-esteem. Another dynamic that happens here is FOMO. FOMO, and that's basically the fear of missing out. A lot of teens report feeling at times like they're just missing the party, or they're missing the scene, and they see others just having a great time, always with other people through social media, and they assume that those down hours that they have, that they're losers, that they're missing out. What they don't realize is the people that are posting these things in social media, they also have their downtime, they have their alone time, they have their time where they're just doing their homework, or where they're just sitting around the house and in their pajamas, and they don't look so glowed up. So what we've really found is some of the research is showing that body image issues have become worse over the past decade for 1 in 3 teen girls. In fact, there are a number of teens that are blaming Instagram or other social media vehicles for really increasing or spiking their rate of anxiety and depression because of these dynamics. And some of these reactions have been pretty consistent across groups. So what this leads toward is teens feeling like they're just not good enough. In fact, there are some studies, and we list these in our article, that teens in the US and the UK found that more than 40% of Instagram users who reported feeling unattractive said the feeling began because of their use of the app. And a quarter of these teens reported feeling that they just weren't good enough. So this is a really huge concern that's happening in terms of screen time and social media and their effect upon our teenagers and their development. There's an author, Jonathan Haidt. He's a famous social psychologist and author, and he's been very in tune on this. He's written some incredible books, one of which is The Righteous Mind. And in some of his work, he noted that in terms of 10 to 14-year-old girls, suicide has doubled over the past decade. And he suggests that Instagram is quote-unquote destroying girls' self-esteem. He highlights as well the concept that I mentioned earlier in terms of this comparison that happens for teenage girls with their contemporaries online, with the filters, with the glowed up pictures, with the ideal circumstances, that this really already takes a challenging problem for teenage girls in comparing themselves to one another. And it's like putting gasoline on this fire. So there's great concerns with that. Now, boys are very much in this mix as well. In a 2019 study, Facebook researchers reported that 14% of boys in the US said that Instagram made them feel worse about themselves. In another, tied specifically to body images, some researchers found that 40% of teen boys felt socially inferior. One American boy told the researchers that the pressure was just constant, and he said, quote, "It's like you can be called out for anything you do. One wrong move, one wrong step. Watch out." So clearly, boys and girls at the teenage level are experiencing tremendous pressure in regard to the influence of the tremendous screen time spent as well as social media. Now, another really difficult aspect of this that's developed and has become an epidemic is the exposure and the use of pornography amongst teens. In fact, 9 out of 10 boys and 6 out of 10 girls are exposed to pornography online before the age of 18. The first exposure to pornography among boys is 12 years old on average. 83% of boys and 57% of girls are exposed to group sex online. These are becoming really big problems, these exposures. In fact, 71% of teens have been reported to have done something to hide their online activity from their parents, and 28% of 16 to 17-year-old teens have unintentionally been exposed to pornography online. In other words, they're not even trying to look for it. You could have a 14-year-old teenage boy, and obviously younger too, literally online where something illicit will just pop up. And 20% of 16-year-olds and 30% of 17-year-olds have received at least one sext, which is basically a text with a nude picture or a photo. And this has become an issue amongst teens as well, sending nude pictures to one another. Now, why is this a problem? It might seem obvious to many. The problem here is that the exposure to the pornography and these online images relate to a neuroreceptor in the brain called dopamine. And dopamine is related to a positive spike in the neural system towards like a high. You know, L-DOPA is a similar thing that's connected with cocaine, to just liken that. to a substance. And it really can give a spike in the system. So if you take a teen boy, for instance, who's starting to look at pornographic pictures, there is dopamine flooding to his brain. And over time, this can create pathways in terms of his neurochemistry. Similar to a deer walking through the woods and taking the same path over and over again, these neural pathways become really solidified. And what can happen is over time, the teenager's brain response to other things that would give pleasure normally gets muted. So they get a numbed pleasure response. And what can also happen is, as these pathways are solidified, addiction can come into play. And so you have a lot of teenagers who are finding themselves in full-fledged pornographic addictions, online addictions, lust addictions. Also, they can gain tremendously distorted views about sex and sexuality without any kind of parental assistance or in terms of those situations, and understanding proper principles in regard to these areas. So what can happen is they can find this pattern really hard to stop. And in regard to the problem, this erodes teen confidence as well, because they start to feel bad about this. They can feel guilty and ashamed and hide this as a secret. And it really can lead to depression as well. And at a certain point, they can feel really powerless to stop. The same is the case with social media, because in social media, I'm not just talking about the pornography here, I'm talking about the hit that one gets when they get a like or get a lot of attention from a social media post. This can activate dopamine in the brain as well. And over time, teenagers can become really habituated and even addicted to getting that dopamine hit each time they get some attention or interaction with their posts. And so they find themselves, even when they're not online, feeling like they're missing out. I better jump back online. Let's see how many likes I have. Let's see how many people are paying attention to my post. And this can become a very destructive pattern as well. So in terms of today, I just really want to bring some understanding in regard to some of the ways that screen time and social media is contributing to eroding teen confidence. And this is something that in our culture we really need to address. I'm going to do some further videos in regard to how to look at this further and address some of these kinds of situations. I hope you found this video helpful in regard to building awareness about some of these issues. Please feel free to like my video today, and of course, if you'd like to listen to further videos, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for taking your time today, and I will definitely be following this up with further videos on this topic, which will also contribute to some action steps that we can take as a culture and as parents to help our teens in this arena. Thanks so much.